Los efectos prácticos le van a ganar siempre a la animación por computadora, de eso no tengo la menor duda. Y de hecho, de esto hablamos con Jeff Cutter, el director de fotografía de Prey, una de las grandes sorpresas del año, de la que no se esperaba mucho, pero que se metió sin proponérselo quizás demasiado entre lo mejor que vimos este año. Hablamos de algunas cuestiones referidas a cuánto fue que se apoyaron en la película original de 1987, cómo fue tener a ese depredador de carne y hueso ahí delante de ellos, cuánto les sirvió para hacer cada una de las escenas. Y también hablamos de algunos problemas en los que casi se meten por lo que fue a ser para mí la mejor secuencia de la película. Todo en este informe sobre Prey.
We now return to Mira Akien and Contre with our latest interview.
When we were scouting, it's so beautiful. You know, the environment is so beautiful, and it is actual First Nations land. So it is land that is controlled by the indigenous tribes of that area. And it's very much untouched. You know, there are some roads that kind of go in there, but you know, there aren't power lines and there aren't structures. And
Yeah.
so it really is very much like what the land was 300 years ago.
Why do you want to hunt? Because you all think that I can't.
I think it was really important to, you know, respect, not only to respect the, you know, the Comanche tribe and the Comanche way of life, but also the Comanche homes and the environment and the landscape that they lived in. So we wanted to see it in all its glory, you know, so we really made an effort to try to shoot these, like, you know, big sweeping drone shots and show and to, you know, and also to show like the small character, her journey, this tiny character in this, you know, giant landscape.
It knows how to hunt. I know how to survive.
Visually, I didn't use much of it. I definitely had another set of films that I referenced because I was trying for a much more naturalistic. And, you know, back in that film is 35, 36, 7, something like that years old, 30, yeah, whatever it is, 35 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, obviously, like in the 80s, you know, there's certain things, and there's a definite 80s feeling to it, I think, to the photography and to all that stuff. So sort of just from a visual standpoint, not so much, but from the standpoint of how they use the camera and the way the sort of action scenes and just how strong and how dynamic so many of the sequences are in the original, and the tension as well. There's quite a lot. It was really interesting actually rewatching it, how there are these very long sequences where, I mean, first of all, you don't even see the predator till like an hour into the movie. You just get the barest glimpses, which I think definitely was something that we were interested in, really teasing it out as much as we could, because, you know, so often less is more. And then when you fill in the gaps with your imagination. So I think the sort of visceral nature of the action, we definitely, you know, referred back to the original for that. But I think that was about all.
And 3, 2, 1, action!
I would love to have everything practical, you know, as much as possible. The more stuff you can shoot practically, I think the more convinced an audience member becomes of the story being real. Yeah. So the more visceral the more sort of tactile and practical that those things are. So yeah, having a guy in a suit, you know, and having his weapons and all those things that are practical, you know, some of that definitely gets augmented in CG, but when it looks good enough and when it looks great as is, then yeah, you try to use all that stuff. You know, I think again, the more real, the better everything becomes. That was that was probably the most difficult sequence in the film, for many reasons. I mean, we shot that over the course of 8 days, and Dan and I had pre-visited in preparation. So we had a whole video, you know, a sort of animated version of it. So we sort of knew the shots and the sequence and all that kind of stuff. But the idea of the scene is that it takes place sort of at dawn, and it's this burnt out forest. But of course, you know, we can't shoot the whole thing at dawn. We had to shoot from sun up to sundown over the course of 8 days. So we ended up, I did have what we call like a fly swatter, which sort of blocks the sun, but only for, it's kind of very small compared to how large. The set was about, I think it was about 80 meters by 80 meters with about 100 trees that art department had set up all in there. And they'd also created the ground, which was like this mulch, like sort of layer of mulch, which didn't really allow us to move some of the vehicles around. So really what we did was we had these 4 massive smoke machines on the back of pickup trucks, and they would drive them around, and then they would just pump in tons and tons of smoke, so much smoke that we would basically blanket and blot out the sun so that any sunlight wouldn't really get through. And, some shots are more effective than others. And a few times the CG had to help out a little bit, but it was a huge undertaking. I mean, we had so much smoke. We were about 45 minutes outside of Calgary in this, rather remote location, but there was so much smoke that emergency helicopters were flying, checking us out because they thought it was like a forest fire.
Come on, we gotta go.
It was uncomfortable. It's all safe smoke that's designed that you can, basically breathe it. You don't want to be breathing it in 100%.
Yeah.
And so it goes quickly. So we pump it in for the shot, and then it basically disappears. The wind blows it away, and then we just keep doing that for 8 days. Yeah. So we did shoot all those scenes with a thermal camera. We actually shot with 2 cameras. We used a 3D rig, the VFX supervisor, Ryan Cook. He was really adamant about, he didn't want to do it as a post effect. He wanted to do it like a real thermal vision, which I completely agreed with. Again, saying as much as you can do, in camera. We did end up shooting like a 3D rig that allowed us to basically shoot the thermal camera and a motion picture camera simultaneously of the same image, so that if they needed to ever pull out any of that image or combine them in any way. We did some research because on the original, they had all kinds of problems with the thermal camera because it was so hot in the jungle.
Yeah.
That they were having to like hose down the trees and the ground with water to try to cool it down. And occasionally we had a few times where we'd be set up in the middle of the day and the ground would just be too hot. So everything would be red and yellow. So you didn't get that cool, predator vision because everything was red and yellow. So occasionally it didn't work. We just had to wait till it cooled down. As far as I knew, from the very first draft I read, early last year, the dog always survived. Coco was a rescue. She was a rescue that they found specifically for this movie. So she had never appeared in another film before. Now, the trainers definitely were working with her and the trainers were on the set. But yes, it was not a dog that just knew, go, stay, sit, didn't, and she was very, very high energy. So sometimes difficult to wrangle her. But I think that then, that energy translates into this kind of great performance of her. And yeah, you have this sort of wonderful dog. I mean, it's amazing, like Dakota Beavers, it's his film debut. It's Coco's film debut. It's quite a lot of firsts.
Whatever did this.